All right. Well, thank you for inviting me today, or this evening anyway. Um, I'm going to talk about medicine wheels, which are a specific type of stone feature on the plains of North America, especially the northwestern plains of North America. Um, I won't give you too much more than that for now. You'll see as we go along, though, that there is some awful truths about medicine wheels that we'll get into. But before I get too far ahead, my name is Trevor Peck. I've been in archaeology for a while anyway. I was an undergrad at the University of Calgary. Then I got to work at Head Smashed In, which you guys have at U of L have returned to recently. I did my MA at U of A. Got to work at Fort Edmonton then. I came back to U of C, did my PhD. Got a chance to work at the Stampede site. For my MA, I did a thesis on projectile points all across the Northern Plains. And for my PhD, I did a thin sectioning of bison teeth to try and get seasonality on archaeological sites. So I've kind of had a wide range of topics that I've studied on the plains. And after that, I worked at the Archaeological Survey of Alberta for about 17 years. So I've been around a while. And the last 5 years, I've just kind of kicked around as a consultant. So I've pretty much done almost everything you can do in archaeology. Um, but we'll leave it at that for now. Let's just say I've been around. Okay, is this not going to move for me? It's not going to move for me. Come on, move. Make it move. Oh, there it goes. All right. Sean mentioned the land acknowledgement. Mine certainly isn't as elaborate as Sean's, but I definitely give a nod to folks as we go through the presentation. But I'd like to acknowledge that this presentation depicts archaeology in the traditional land and territories of the Blackfoot Confederacy, so Sikisikaitisitapi, as well as the Tsuut'ina. Certainly a number of the Nakota nations, the Bearspaw, Chiniki, and Wesley, and of course the Métis Nation of Alberta is present across most of southern Alberta as well. So there's also a number of sites that we'll talk about in Saskatchewan, which is covered by treaties 2, 4, 5, 6, 8, and 10, especially treaties 4, 6, and 7. And of course, you have a lot of the Atsina, the Cree, and the Assiniboine, or this in that area. So we're gonna be talking about those areas as well, and we recognize that that's a traditional territory of those folks as well. All right, the actual topic for today. What is a medicine wheel? In terms of my research, I've been able to trace the first use of the medicine wheel back to 1895 to a Forests and Streams article where a gentleman named Paul Frank wrote up, and as far as I can tell, used the word for the first time. And there's a transcription there, and I'll just read it to you. And he wrote, no wonder then that the former inhabitants of the country, and there was this inappropriate word there, so I just put indigenous people, used to come here to worship their deity. On the very top of Medicine Mountain can still be seen the so-called medicine wheel, the plan and general arrangement of which bears a striking resemblance to the famous calendar stone of Old Mexico. As the name implies, the medicine wheel is a circle composed of loose stone. In the middle of it is a hut, also of stone, from which spokes radiate like a wheel to the circumference, there terminating in small huts. It is said that these small huts were, during the religious ceremonies, occupied by the medicine men of different tribes, while the large hut in the center was supposed to be the abode of the Manitou. All right, so we've got a wheel-shaped object on top of Medicine Mountain, hence medicine wheel. And that, of course, is the Big Horn medicine wheel in Wyoming that they're talking about. So it didn't take long for anthropologists to get in on this. Sims in 1903 did a sketch of it, and he wrote, the wheel appears to be of great antiquity. The nearest Indian tribe, the Crows, whose reservation is only a few miles distance, not knowing about its age, and the former inhabitants of the country, the Sioux, say it was on Medicine Mountain when they and their forebears occupied the land. And then Grinnell did a better sketch of it in 1922. One thing that I'm not going to talk a lot about is the astronomy of the medicine wheels. I gave this presentation in Saskatchewan, and Alice Kehoe did point out that there probably are some astronomical alignments with some of these things. But what I don't want to get into is things like Gordon Freeman did, where every single rock on the landscape was aligned to something at some point in time, because that just simply can't be true. Some of these things may have aligned to very prominent stars that come up. The Blackfoot certainly have a very strong understanding of the stars in the skies and have many tales about them. So I don't doubt that some of these things have astronomical alignments, but I doubt very much that that was the main purpose of these things. So I'm just not going to go there. So if that's what you're here for, you're not going to get it. There have been numerous studies about medicine wheels in quotes. But the two biggest ones were one by John Brumley in 1988, and that's the Alberta government published it in a blue book, and that's on the left of your screen right now. And that was very seminal. A lot of people basically that set the kind of the cast for all medicine wheels studies after that. And then more recently, thanks to the Archaeological Society, in fact, Barney Reeves and Mark Kennedy pulled together a bunch of information about medicine wheels and pulled together a number of other publications that hadn't been published before. And what they did that was different than Brumley is they had decades more recent information and literally went to a number of states and provinces that Brumley couldn't get. And oh, I see that my internet connection is unstable. You guys can still hear me? Still good? Okay. They went to a number of states and provinces and got a much more updated set of information. And they also started to think about these things in terms of the way they lay on the landscape, not just the structures themselves. So Brumley did something that was really important. He actually defined what a medicine wheel actually is. And let's see if I can get rid of that thing. There we go. And a medicine wheel has to have a couple of things at least. They are largely constructed of unmodified natural stone, possibly with some earth intentionally involved in making the medicine wheel. And it must consist of a combination of at least two of the following three primary components. So you have to have two of the following three things. Either has a prominent cairn, one or more concentric stone rings, and two or more stone lines. And then also, number three, they're generally made up of rarely symmetrical alignments of the above primary components. And there's often things around there that ancillary features that go with these things, like stone circles, maybe effigies, things like that. And when he took those kind of combination of things and looked at what was out on the landscape, he came up with 8 subgroups of medicine wheels. And we're going to go through each one of these. So this is just quickly what they each are, but then I'm going to go through each one. So we don't need to really belabor these definitions. We're going to talk about them in a bit. But basically, he came up with 8 subgroups based on those 3 components we just talked about. And this is basically the 8 subgroups right here as drawings. But subgroup number 1, basically, this is one most people are familiar with. If they've ever seen a picture of a medicine wheel, you got the big cairn with a big circle around it. And so you can see Anderson number 1 in the lower right, and in the lower left, you see British bloc. And when Brumley did his study, there were 22 of these known, and 19 of them were in Alberta alone. And when Reeves and Kennedy did their study, they actually found 61. So that's a huge increase from 22, 61, 24 in Alberta, and 21 in Saskatchewan. So again, most of them are still in Canada, but they found a huge increase in the number of these features. And here's just another one. This is on the Suffield Military Reserve, so not too far from where you guys are in Lethbridge. It's a Twin Peaks medicine wheel. I actually had the privilege of mapping this medicine wheel. It had been excavated back in the 60s, but there wasn't a map that went with it. So we went back and mapped it. Now I'll come back to this topic again in a bit. The subgroup 2 medicine wheel is a stone cairn with a ring of stone, which has some arms extending out from it, almost like a chute coming towards the stone cairn in the middle. So again, Antelope Hill is down south, and so is Sundial Medicine Wheel, but you can see a picture of Antelope Hill from the air on the lower right, and then you're actually standing in the chute or the arms in the picture on the left, coming towards the cairn in this.
It was on sale.
Center. It was on sale. Awesome. This is an aerial view of Sundial Medicine Wheel, and you can see the chute coming in from the left and going right into the big cairn in the middle. And you can see that slight indentation there. One of the awful truths of medicine wheels is that the vast majority of them have been potted and thus disturbed. At the same time, you can also see some of the red flagging and stuff that's there, the red color. These things are still living archaeological sites. I don't know how else to describe them. That the First Nations still go and use these things and make offerings at them. So it's a weird combination of archaeologists want to preserve these things statically. At the same time, First Nations, they're still alive to them and growing. So you can see the offerings that have been placed there. So I don't have, personally as an archaeologist, I don't have an issue with the First Nations continuing to use them in traditional ways. I do have an issue with pot hunters going in and digging out the middle of them. But that's a totally different topic on ethics, and that's not what we're talking about today. Subgroup 3 medicine wheels have a prominent cairn and then 2 or more stone lines radiating out from them. There's one it's called the Wind medicine wheel, and you can see it's on a small rise there with the arm coming towards you in the lower left image. And then the Natipinawa medicine wheel. This is actually on the Kainai Reserve, so very close to where you guys are. You can see the large cairn in the middle and then the spokes radiating out from it. Subgroup 4 medicine wheels. These ones have the stone circle about the size of a tipi ring with the spokes radiating out from the edge of the stone circle. And in the lower left image, you can see the Ellis medicine wheel. I'm getting the internet connection is unstable still. I hope you guys can still hear me. But you can see the Ellis medicine wheel from the air, and it's on the Suffield Military Reserve, quite close to you guys. And then the Ziegenbein medicine wheel in the lower right with the stone circle. And you can just see, if you look closely, some stones in the middle of that, and that's where a hearth potentially would have been if you're thinking of this as a stone circle, like a teepee ring. This is actually an image of the Wolfchild medicine wheel. You can't quite see the stone circle in the middle, but you can see the radiating lines coming out. There's a drawing of it. This is another awful truth about medicine wheels. This was on the Kainai Reserve, and I say is because you can see that line in the image on the left. That was a crop line, which has now moved further east and has wiped out this medicine wheel. It is gone. The only record we have of it is in that picture that you see there in that drawing. This is happening still to today. Again, I'll talk more about protection of medicine wheels a bit as we go along. This is a subgroup 5 medicine wheel. It has kind of a small cairn in the middle or a circle, radiating out to a larger circle. These are very rare. Up till now, most of these medicine wheels have been in the tens of examples of them. This one only has a couple of examples. As you can see by the numbers there, Brumley only said there was 2, and Reeves and Kennedy actually found there were about 6 of these things. This one is an example from Jameson's Place. It's on the Bow River, just southeast of Calgary. But they're not that common compared to the ones we've been talking about so far, which there's usually a couple dozen at least of examples of them. Subgroup 6, we've already talked about one of the more famous ones. That's the bighorn medicine wheel. But these are the medicine wheels with the big cairns in the middle, a big circle around it with spokes radiating out from the center out to the outer circle. Brumley only saw 3 of these when he did his study, and Reeves and Kennedy have found a number of more, so there's 15 of these. The ones we're looking at, the image right here is the Majorville medicine wheel. They're both pictures of the Majorville. One's looking straight down on it from above, and you can see all the tracks and everything literally have highlighted where the spokes and the circle is, and then same thing, but from a kind of a oblique angle. And again, we're going to talk more about where these things are located, but you can see that the Majorville medicine wheel is on the highest hill in the area with a beautiful view all around it. It is probably one of the larger medicine wheels around, and probably used longer than most medicine wheels as well. Probably about 5,500 years of use is known at that medicine wheel. Subgroup 7 medicine wheels, they have a large cairn, and they have a circle around it, but they also have these weird spokes going off this the margin of the circle. Brumley only thought there was 2 of these that he found, and Reeves and Kennedy thought they found 3. And this is actually a picture of the minor medicine wheel, but the Many Islands Lake medicine wheel, again, down south, closer to you guys, is an example of a subgroup 7 medicine wheel. And then the subgroup 8 medicine wheel has a prominent cairn with a circle around it, and then spokes that lead from the cairn out through the encircling circle, out maybe even out to some smaller cairns on the periphery. Brumley found 2 of these when he did his study. None of them were in Alberta, and Reeves and Kennedy found only 2 of these, and they're both in Saskatchewan. This is a picture of the Moose Mountain medicine wheel, and you can see it depicted as a just the site, that the structure itself on the lower left. But what Reeves and Kennedy did, and it's a little bit hard to see because the picture is a bit too small. They started placing these things in landscapes, and that's what the image on the right hand tries to show. The kind of the white blob in the upper right is actually the medicine wheel, and then there's a number of other features and stone lines that are around it. So that's what they were trying to get at a bit more, is what these things look like in the landscape. One of the subgroups that Brumley did not have was subgroup 9. Reeves and Kennedy thought they should add this because it seemed to be a pattern they recognized that was not captured by Brumley. So instead of just the 8 subgroups, they argue there's 9. And so it has a concentric circle with lines radiating out to another concentric circle from a center point. So it's they said there was 3 of these that they could find, but Brumley, of course, didn't find any when he looked at it. I don't know. It almost, you could look at this and maybe argue it might even be an effigy of a turtle. But anyway, they suggested there's this next subgroup 9 medicine wheel. And then last but not least, when Brumley did his classification, he felt quite confident in placing everything into one of his 8 subgroups. Reeves and Kennedy felt there was 9, in quotes, medicine wheels that they couldn't fit into any of the categories at all. So they had kind of 9 leftovers. So when you look at the numbers, Brumley had about 67, in quote, medicine wheels to deal with when he did his initial study. And Reeves and Kennedy had about 159 medicine wheels that they basically looked at in their data set. Of those, Brumley, of his 67, 38 were in Alberta, and of Reeves and Kennedy's 159, 57 of those are in Alberta. So there's a high percentage of these things are in Alberta and Saskatchewan as well, and Montana. If you put those 3 together, the vast majority of the medicine wheels are in those 2 provinces and state. All right. So one of the problems that has come out of this that I see is that these features are treated very superficially. People see the structures, and that's pretty much where the classification ends. What's really hard to determine is the sequence, if it's all done at once, or if it's a palimpsest where a certain thing happens and then other things are added and then other things are added. So, for example, everyone saw the Bighorn medicine wheel. Was it just the cairn and then they added the lines and then they added the circle? Or was it just a small cairn at first? We just don't know. We don't understand that sequence at all. And we have hints about that, and I'll get to that in a bit, but we don't know. And lastly, what Reason Kennedy started to address was no one ever looks at the landscape that these things are set in, the landscape itself, and then all the ancillary features. So there's so much work that could be done on these things that is just sitting there waiting to be looked at. And people have started looking at things like iconometry and OSL dating of underneath the sediments underneath the rocks to try and get ideas about the sequence of these things. But of course, you need a lot of First Nations buy-in, and these things are technically difficult to do and they're expensive. So we're in the early days of trying to get further information about these types of features. And of course, the last thing is a number of these things have been excavated. Very little of the excavated material has been properly reported. This is one of the awful truths of medicine wheels. It's amazing how much stuff has been excavated and then how little has actually been reported. So there's another awful truth about medicine wheels for you. So back in about 2008, I was younger, but I noticed what was going on with these features. And we knew they were getting impacted. We knew there's a bunch of material that had been excavated that no one did anything with. So I actually I was at the Archaeological Survey of Alberta at the time, so I had good backers to help me with the project. So we moved forward with the idea that as a resource management team, we needed to check on all these things and their status. We can't protect something if we don't know where it is, what it looks like, and what is the status. So we did a project where provincially we hired consultants to go check on all the medicine wheels that we knew of and decide if they're medicine wheels and report on their status. And so that was done. As a government official, I started working with First Nations to look at all the medicine wheels on all the First Nations lands. And I also went on to the federal lands of the military. So the British bloc, Suffield Military Reserve, to check on the medicine wheels that were on those lands. Even though they're not technically a provincial resource, it was important to keep the data set together, in my opinion anyway. And I got backing from the Archaeological Survey at the time. The other thing I did was I pulled together all the sites that had been excavated, and you can see a list of them there for at least Alberta. It may surprise you that the Majorville Medicine Wheel was excavated. The southern half of it was by the University of Calgary. Well, the gentleman that excavated it did report on it quite thoroughly. The vast majority of the material from Majorville has not been reported. He reported on the cool stuff. I reanalyzed all the material from Majorville, but I have a complete catalog. I just haven't had time to deal with it. But my plan was to use GIS to recreate the cairn 3D based on the 3-point provenience of all the artifacts. Rumsey has been excavated. There has been an analysis of any of the material from that site. British block has been excavated. There has been no analysis of any of the artifacts from that site, and it probably dates as old as Majorville Cairn, and the data is just sitting there for someone to do something with. Twin Peaks was excavated. I actually told you earlier that, and I mapped the medicine wheel. We did initial analysis of the material, but certainly someone could do a lot more with that material. Many berries has been excavated, and there is a gray literature report done by, I believe, members of the Archaeological Society, but it certainly could be done at a much higher level of analysis than what was initially done, and it's not available. You have to be able to dig that report up in the gray literature. The berry medicine wheel was excavated and reported on by Forbes, but the only reason it was reported is because they didn't find anything when they dug it up. The Ellis medicine wheel is probably the best excavated and reported on medicine wheel in the province. That was by John Brumley. Many Islands Lake was also partially excavated, and it was also well reported by Brumley. And those are in that medicine wheel volume that the Archaeological Society put out, by the way. Buffalo bird was kind of amateurishly excavated, and there's been no analysis of that. So this is one of the real awful truths of medicine wheel, is that a lot of material has been excavated, presumably with the best intentions of writing things up, and a ton of work could still be done on them. So if there's any young archaeologists with aims of working on something like this, there's a lot of work that could still be done. So put that in your pocket. Just give you a quick look at some of these things. This is the Majorville medicine wheel. You can see that the south half is been excavated in the middle photograph. It was written up in the Mercury series, but like I said, it was mainly the goodies that were shown. Well over 50% of the stuff was never dealt with in that analysis. It was just the goodies. And like I said, it's all been cataloged. It's all at the Royal Alberta Museum. It's just someone's got to sit down and do it. And I think you could produce everything in a 3D model in GIS and then actually pull it apart like an onion if you've got good GIS skills and do something really good with that site. Same thing with British Block. British Block was excavated in exactly the same way. You can see Richard Forbes in the lower right standing in the cut off south portion of the Majorville, the British Block medicine wheel, giving a lecture to presumably the Archaeological Society of Alberta. And then the top picture just shows the medicine wheel cut in half there as well. The thing about British Block is it has a nappy effigy in it. And if you look really closely at the left image, just right northwest of the cairn, you can see two lines. That's the legs of a nappy effigy in that image there. I told you I worked on the Twin Peak medicine wheel. You can see it, that military tower T12 sticking up and the cairns right beside it. It's certainly got a lot of old woman's material from it and both points and pottery. And then there's the map that we generated when we were there. And again, more work could be done at it, but I felt like we got at least some preliminary information out for people to use. Okay. So you've seen that there's already between Brumley and Reeves and Kennedy that there's some discrepancy in what a medicine wheel technically could be, or that they've already changed the definition a bit. So let's go back and look at what people have been calling a medicine wheel. Tom Keogh was the first to try and define medicine wheel, and he called it a cairn or a circle of stones, occasionally concentric circles, from the center of which radiate series of rows of other stones. And Dempsey said, he suggested that the Blackfoot medicine wheel, and this is kind of important for later, a circle of stones or tipi ring with concentric lines of stones of varying lengths extending away from it in the four cardinal directions. Then Maloof suggested medicine wheels were stone circles which have rock lines internal like the spokes of a wheel. And Wheel suggested medicine wheel was a central circle or cairn from which lines of stones radiate outward, sometimes to an enclosed circle. And I'm not going to read the next one. It's long. Forbes, one of the grandfathers of Alberta archaeology, suggested typically medicine wheels are circles of stones from which several spokes of stones radiate. The stone circles are generally larger than tipi rings, but seldom exceed 30 feet in diameter. Near the center, there are maybe a small circle, possibly representing a hearth. The length of the spokes is usually approximately the same as the diameter of the stone circle. Medicine wheels of historic times characteristically have 4 spokes. Older prehistoric examples are often have 5, sometimes more. There appears to be no consistent pattern to their location. Where wheels are associated with large cairns, however, they are invariably placed on high hills, which provide excellent vistas of the surroundings. Ian Brace in Saskatchewan suggested, oh, well, whatever. You can read that for yourself. And then Calder, he's the one who excavated Majorville. continue to differentiate types of medicine wheels and exclude the Blackfoot medicine wheel from this category. The term medicine wheel has been broadly used in the literature to refer to virtually all circle of stone exclusive tipi rings with or without associated cairns and spokes, and occasionally been used to designate spokes lacking circles or cairns. For the purpose of this thesis, so this is his stuff at Majorville, the vast array of isolated effigies, stylized rock alignments, small isolated cairns, and small Blackfoot mortuary tipi rings must be excluded from the concept, even though some may, in some various combinations of large circles or concentric circles of stones, large cairns, and lines of rock, various and irregular lengths and number. Medicine wheels then may consist of circles and or spokes, either or both which are in combination with a cairn. Such features are usually located in prominent topographic locations, but they may be found in a variety of locales. So you're seeing a huge range of opinions of what a medicine wheel is. There's just a couple more, like Rod and I talked about medicine wheels. So that's Rod Vickers. Vote actually did a very statistical study of what medicine wheels were. Don't want to belabor it too much, but the point's coming up here. Michael Wilson, which some of you may know, he was at Lethbridge for a while. Basically, this is summing up where we're at. We are faced with the pragmatically inescapable conclusion that medicine wheels are different things to different people. Long before the coming of the white man, any single site could have been used in several different ways, and the historical documentation of one such use does not exclude others, nor does it prove that the site was constructed originally from the documented purpose. And then, of course, Neil Moreau, which some of you probably know. Archaeologists have lumped medicine wheel structures into a single category, and in doing so have de-emphasized the relevance of the variability and context of individual wheels. And then vote. In fact, the simplest position in the present confusion about medicine wheels would be to suppose that there are many different kinds of structures in the group called medicine wheels and many different functions for those structures. This is a position which many researchers have taken, but nobody has attempted to analyze if such medicine wheel types really exist in the current data. All right, here's the last awful truth for you. Everyone's been basing their work on Brumley, right? What did Brumley say? The term medicine wheel is as fine as a convenient label for a diverse class of cultural remains that share a few similar attributes of form and possibly reflect on non-utilitarian roles. However, a review of the literature on medicine wheels indicates that many researchers have attempted to compare and relate various diverse structures simply because they fall in the general class of medicine wheels. The result has been to create an extremely muddled picture of what medicine wheels are and what we know about them. In the following report, I have drawn together and summarized available information on individual medicine wheel sites in the Northern Plains. I have suggested a general definition of medicine wheels and a series of structurally defined groups for medicine wheels. Finally, I have summarized available empirical.
Okay, I found this on the web for a series of structurally.
Thanks, Siri. Finally, I've summarized available empirical information for each medicine wheel subgroup and discussed what is generally known about medicine wheels. Here we go. In developing the defined subgroups, the writer is attempting to pull out these basic forms and use them as a basis for ordering the structures. It remains to be seen whether further research will indicate that all or even some of the subgroups defined here are culturally significant categories, or whether they will require further subdivision. The subgroups defined here, however, hopefully provide a logical starting point to begin a more meaningful examination of diversity exhibited by medicine wheels. So basically, Brumley made them up. And he's saying someone's got to prove that this is a real group or not. And if any of these subgroups are real. And everyone just said, oh no, they're real, and kept slotting things into these 8 slots he created. He set the case up for people to make sense of medicine wheels as a group, and no one ever did. No one's ever said that medicine wheels are an actual group. We've just stuffed stuff into it. And so I'd like to show you how in fact, medicine wheels, the awful truth is, there's no such thing as a medicine wheel. We made it up back because someone found a circle on a hill called Medicine Mountain, and it was a wheel shaped. So we called everything since then medicine wheels. And to do that, I'm going to show you that we can pull apart that whole rubric of medicine wheels by looking at subgroup 4 medicine wheels, because they're not medicine wheels. They're a very distinct thing. They're actually memorial markers. And Tom Kehoe and Hugh Dempsey really pointed this out quite well decades ago, and people didn't quite see the significance of it. Almost everyone in the Northwestern Plains, First Nation in the Northwestern Plains, had death lodges. What no one else did was put the stone circles around the edge of the death lodge. So a death lodge is just when someone dies, they put them in a lodge and sew it up. And then they're left with all their worldly belongings to go on to the next world. But what the Blackfoot did different than everyone else was, they put rocks around the base and then marked out in these lines, presumably, we don't know for sure, but brave deeds or something like that in these lines radiating out from the stone circle. And only the Blackfoot do that. And these are all the examples of those memorial lodges or death lodges that are known on the Northern Plains. So they're that in the upper right corner, you can see they're the subgroup 4, the upper right. And then there's a range of what they look like, but they all have very common characteristics. And then you can see the Dark Horse Medicine Wheel or Death Lodge that's on the Suffield Military Reserve near you guys down in the lower right. And we know that the Blackfoot are only ones who did this because ethnographers and archaeologists went and talked to the Blackfoot and they said, this is how we do it. So you can see Urs talked to the Blackfoot and they said, after the horses were killed in front of the lodge, rocks were piled in lines extending outward from the death lodge in the 4 cardinal directions. Each pile of rocks represent one of the departed leader's crew. So it's, again, a brave deed or something like that. A Sikisikaitisitapi informant said, when a chief died, he was left in his teepee. After it had fallen down a run, any traveler passing would know that a chief died there because of the radiating lines. Kaine said, any stranger passing such a place would recognize that a chief had died there, but the body would not be left there. So this is just saying that sometimes there's the body there, sometimes they're just a marker. And there's a whole bunch more of these examples in the literature that one could go to and look at. But I've just provided a few there. Another thing that Dempsey did was they went to a number of these things that are physically still in the landscape that people knew, the people that were memorialized by them or perhaps even buried in them. So the one on the left is Eagle Child, and it is still visible on the Kainai Reserve. The one in the middle is the Steel Wheel, and it was again known by the Kainai when that gentleman passed away, and it was built then. And then the one on the right, the many spotted horses, that one was actually destroyed in a flood and recreated higher up on again on the Kainai Reserve. But it is again a known memorial to a known individual in historic times. Another important thing here is the Blackfoot from Medicine Wheel, and this is the medicine wheels we're talking about now. So the death lodges is Asotakituskin, which means it's a type of medicine wheel. It means from all sides a small marker of stones for posterity, right? If you're talking about an actual medicine wheel like Majorville, they have a totally different word for it. And you can see that it's Makitan. They're not at all. They don't even use the same words. So these are totally unrelated things. One is a death marker or a memorial, and another one means something totally different. So here's, I know this is an excavation. Of course, people don't do this anymore. Archaeologists don't do this anymore. At the time this was conducted, it wasn't known what these things were, for example. In fact, this was one that actually started archaeologists thinking what these things actually were. It was excavated in 74. But you can see it's a stone circle about the size of a teepee. It's about 4 meters across. When they excavated it, there was actually 66 fragments of human bones in it. There is some points dating to the old woman's phase, and there was a radiocarbon date on a wooden peg in there that dates to the old woman's phase. So, not to get into a sidetrack, but basically, woman's phase is almost synonymous with the Blackfoot, and the date and everything is bordering on historic times. It's about 400 years old. So, this was seen as an example of a memorial with the actual individual in it. Not saying that they're all like that. In fact, one of the Blackfoot informants said they don't leave the person in it, but this is what was found at the Ellis Medicine Wheel. That was the only one that I know that's ever been excavated. And of course, when archaeologists found out that's what they were, um, we just don't do that anymore. But that's what was done in the 70s. One more line of evidence that shows this is a Blackfoot phenomenon comes from robe art. This is the Onesta robe. Importantly, it was painted by his son. Usually robe art is painted by the person themselves. But in this case, it was painted by the son, and they were able to capture the individual's death, which is in the upper right corner. So Onesta was a signer of Treaty 7 at Blackfoot Crossing. So he's quite an important individual. And his son painted this robe and amazingly captured his Death Lodge medicine wheel. I got to stop calling it that. Death Lodge in the upper right corner of the robe. And you can see there's 4 scalps. That's what those kind of weird comb things look like. 4 scouting party imagery, and then the actual Death Lodge itself. And Dempsey's son actually concurs that that's what this image is. So it's interpreted by the Blackfoot as that. So it's just another line of evidence showing that this is a Blackfoot phenomenon. No one else does this. Oh, this makes everything clear. So one thing that we did do was when we were looking at these death lodges was we looked at how everyone else classified these things and tried to compare them. And it basically what it came down to was Bo tried to do it statistically, and he got some weird hangers on that didn't really match the stone circle idea. What it really came down to was Barney Reeves and Mark Kennedy had a few weird things in Texas where the stone circle was very small, like a meter across with the long arms. They were kind of like spider medicine wheels, if you want to think of it that way. And so if we're going to talk about these specific features, they have to be the size of a stone circle, a living structure. And then all of a sudden, it's very limited to that group of pictures I showed you earlier. And it cuts out these other kind of peripheral kind of stone structures. And this is just some stats to show you that the ones that we isolated are quite a cohesive group. Statistically, you can't really read it. Sorry, I didn't realize it was that bad. This is just some pictures to show you what some of these things look like. So the Crowfoot Medicine Wheel or Death Lodge is actually on the Sikisikaitisitapi Reserve. And you can see the spokes going into the large circle. And then you can just see the hearth in the middle of it, I think, if you squint just right. And the Hutton Medicine Wheel over on the Red Deer River, you can see the lines going in towards the stone circle in the middle. And we did a bit of a deep dive into those things and tried to figure out if the spokes and the stone circle size were all any kind of statistical significance. And the only thing we really found was that historically, the medicine wheels were much more symmetrical. So all the ones that you saw that were attributed to known historical figures had very perfectly designed circles. And the other thing is their spokes that radiated out were stone cairn lines. So they weren't butted up stones, but they were a stone, then a space, and a stone, then a space. And usually they only had the cardinal directions represented. And the interesting thing is The exception, the many spotted horses medicine wheel, remember what I said about it? It was recreated. So they're going back to copying other ones they've seen and recreating it differently. And then as you go back in time, we're inferring this a bit. As you go back in time, we believe that, like, for example, Ellis is at least 400 years old. It had the butted up stones. You start getting the stone lines. So we find the ones in between, things like Sun River and Zegenbein, they have fairly symmetrical circles, but they have both stone lines that are abutted and cairn lines. So we figure those are kind of like somewhere between the historically known ones and the clearly pre-contact ones. So again, it's a very rough chronology, but there's certainly, you can see a development in this thing. It's not just a static ideology, it's actually a developmental thing that these memorials actually change slowly through time. The other thing that these memorials have in common is that they're geographically very close together. They're exactly over the traditional Blackfoot territory, which is no surprise because the Blackfoot are the ones who, as far as we can tell, are the only ones who ever made these things. So you can see, again, this is what the structures look like when we limit the stone circle to being a teepee ring size stone circle, and then the distribution of what they look like on the landscape on the right-hand side, very much in traditional Blackfoot territory. So I guess the main point of my talk is that if I can actually take a medicine wheel subgroup and define it as a memorial marker, then the rest of these subgroups may or may not have any other meaning. And they're not a group anymore. They're a bunch of things we've lumped together because they're stones on the surface. And I can actually give a couple more examples, but I don't want to go too long here, Sean or Kevin. Do you want me to go on for a bit more, or where are we
Yeah.
at for time?
No, this is awesome. I think this is
I can
awesome.
do a couple more examples, maybe like 10, 15 minutes, or just stop.
That's good. Yeah, because we had the meeting and everything, and it took us a while to get set up. So you're still good for time.
Still good for time? Okay. So I guess what I'd say is we should be able to do this for other groups, right? They should be able to make cohesive groups or they should make sense. So let's look at another one. We talked about the subgroup 3 ones with the cairns with the spokes going out from them. So this is the tip. Oh my God, I can't say it. It's the one on the Kainai Reserve. All right. So let's look at the ethnographic record. There's a cairn attributed to the gambler. When a great chief or warrior died, a lodge was placed over him. And when this was thrown down by the wind, the body of the deceased was laid upon the ground, and a cairn of stones erected over it. There's a cairn called the Gambler's Cairn near the store of I.J. Baker in the town of McLeod. Several years ago, a pagan camp of Indians located on this spot was attacked by smallpox, and the disease proved so fatal that 50 death lodges were left standing. Among those who died was the gambler, head of the pagan tribe. His people placed a lodge cover over him, and when it had been blown down by the western winds, he was reverently laying on the ground and the cairn of stones erected. The original cairn was 3 or 4 feet in diameter, with rows of stones between 40 and 50 feet each in length, leading to the cairn. Only one row of stone remains, and the cairn is worn nearly level with the street. This simple monument is of little interest to the passing stranger, but the Indian riding past will turn to his comrade and say, I'm not sure how to say that. Okay, so here we've got another example where we have some historical documentation of what this type of medicine wheel might be. And here are the subgroup 3 medicine wheels and what they look like. All right. So they have the cairn and the spokes going out from them. But there's a bit of a trick here. It's called scale. The image on the left is Nitapinawa. It's the one on the Kainai Reserve. But look what happens when you put it to scale with the Hallbright medicine wheel in Saskatchewan. It's tiny. The Albright one is also on a fairly large knoll. So let's compare a bunch of these things in. All of a sudden, all the ones in the west are quite tiny, and all the ones in the east are quite large. And in fact, a lot of them are on knolls. And I can tell you, we know what came out of the Gambler one, some human bones. The Albright one itself produced, I think 4 or 5, the remains of at least 4 or 5 individuals, plus a bunch of very Eastern looking grave goods. I know there's a couple pipes and some other things. And you can see that there's a river there going down to the which river is it? Shoot. Anyway, there's a river going off towards Manitoba there, which leads to where the mound societies are and stuff like that. And basically, again, I'm speculating a bit, but basically, I think those brighter yellow dots are the mound society influences on the plains. It's too hard to dig up dirt on the plains, so just pile some rocks on an already existing hill. And those are burials that way, where the ones in Alberta and Western Saskatchewan are much smaller scale. Whether they reflect the same ideology or not is totally, we don't know. But it certainly seems like something different is going on. The fact that no one's ever thought to look at the scale of these things and show the distribution difference, it's just, to me, there's a lot more information that can be garnered from these things if someone sits down and looks at them. Again, the ones in the east are on top of fairly large knolls. The ones in the west aren't. They're just subtle markers on the landscape. Some of them are on points, some of them are on slight knolls, but they're not like on those mounds like that. That one that I showed you for Albright was. So I think someone could really go to town on these things and find out a lot more information just by looking at the location and some of the material that have been excavated out of some of these things. So that's just a quick example. And one other one, the subgroup 2 medicine wheels. Those are the ones with the kind of the corridor leading into a big circle with the cairn in the middle. All right, what's going on there? Well, first of all, I always like to put things to scale, find out where they are in the landscape. So you can see they're kind of scattered across the kind of the southern Alberta and southern Saskatchewan there. Rod Vickers did a really interesting study with lichenometry and found that the inside of the sundial medicine wheel was built first, and then someone came along and put a bigger ring around it later. So it's definitely a palimpsest site, so to speak. And then you can see all of the type 2 subgroup medicine wheels on the left. And you can see I've added that one with the spokes going out from the side of it in there, because it really, all that is someone's just add some lines to a subgroup 2 medicine wheel, as far as I can tell. Again, you'd have to do some studies with luminescence dating or something like that to show the sequence of events there, but it really does just look like it fits in there. So that's the second one from the upper left there. And again, you look at the scale of these things, and they're all very similar in size. The one that stands out the most is E, which is Roy Rivers. And look at that. The corridor is actually on the inside of the circle, not the outside, which suggests something maybe different is going on there. Okay, so we've got all these things about the same size with a corridor going into a big circle with a cairn in the middle. What could possibly be going on? The ritual has ended. Only the center pole with its prayer offerings remains standing. But the circle of the stones that had held the lodge covers to the earth remained. A permanent reminder of the lodge of the Matoki had stood there. The Matoki were a women's society, and their main job, or one of their main jobs, was to make sure that the bison kept coming back. And they literally did a mock bison drive into their tent. So they had people forming a corridor going into their tent and drove people bison into the tent, up a corridor and into the tent towards the central pool. Again, it's speculating that these things are images of a bison drive or a bison corral, but it's a place to start. So maybe these subgroups have some meaning to them, but they're not all. Medicine wheel is not the right term for them. They all have their own separate function, potentially, and there's a lot of work that could be done. So I would love to see some the the younger archaeologists take up some of these things and work with the Blackfoot. And that's one thing I want to go back here. Where is that slide? I should have mentioned it more. This one here. The Alberta Archaeology, or the Medicine Wheel project I did. I didn't just start doing this. I actually sat down with a panel of Blackfoot elders and got permission to do this project. I should have mentioned this. Sorry, I missed this part. So in order for me to do this project, I had to go and be part of a sweat with the Blackfoot elders at Majorville. So Majorville is actually right above that white truck on that hill there, and that's a sweat lodge at Majorville. They actually supported wholeheartedly the reanalysis of the excavated stuff, revisiting the sites. And so when I was going to the reserves, I was going to on the reserves with the elders to these sites and finding them with them. I wasn't just some white guy wandering out there. This was a collective effort to document these things and make sure that they were recorded in GIS systems and they wouldn't get impacted. And that we tried to get more and more information on these things. It wasn't just whatever, someone trying to find the mystery of the medicine wheel. This is about trying to get First Nations involved in where these things were, how to protect them, and trying to get community interest in them to try and further document them and get more information about them. Again, I was at the government for a few years and it lost momentum when I left, I'm afraid. But this is something near and dear to my heart, and I'd love to continue working on it. So if anyone wants to pick up on this, feel free to contact me. And there's still a lot of people that on Blackfoot elders and stuff that would support the research. I think it's all about just making the right connections. So maybe with that, I'll leave it there and say thank you, and I hope you had a good time.